Hello, Alexa developers, and welcome to the chat with Max Eichbaum, where he will share his perspective on Starfinder. So Max is a designer. He is not a Skype logo. He is a designer, and there he is. Welcome, Max,
Hi.
to the stream here.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
So Max has done a lot of work on voice games. So actually, oh, sorry, you're not Max Child. The wrong Max. We have Max Eichbaum here.
Yeah,
That is my bad.
no
So
worries.
Max, can you share a bit about your past? Like, what got you into building voice games on Alexa?
I kind of lucked into it. So I have been a UX designer in the Seattle area for about 12 years. I've been at Amazon for 4, and I was working in AWS on the relational database service console, and eventually moved over. I was really interested in voice design, and I had some experience, some opportunities to receive some training in how to do that internally. And then there was a position that was open, and I applied to it. I moved over, and then that team transitioned into a team that worked on games. And so it's been about 2 years. And I've been designing interactions for voice and games, and just trying to learn as fast as I can. Along the way, I worked on, made a board game to teach myself game design, and yeah, it's been really fun. Yeah, that's where we spend a lot of our time. Um, my experience has been that the basic elements of it are the same.
Oh, sorry,
So
sorry. 1 second, Max. I asked Max about the. I had my mic off. I asked Max about the differences or similarities with voice design versus traditional UX design.
yeah, and yeah, my background is in user-centered design, and so the there's much more that's similar than different. In fact, the overall process is really similar. So, understanding your customer, creating prototypes, putting them in front of customers, learning from them how they can be better. Um, there are some things that are different, like the constraints are different, kind of like when everything went from being desktop to being mobile. The basic design principles are the same, but some of the constraints are different. So it's the same with voice. There are some things that you can do that you can't do when you have something that's more visual, and there are obviously a lot of things that you can't.
That's that's pretty cool. So we're actually going to go switch over, and I have a pre-recorded video of myself playing through Starfinder, and we're going to pause, rewind, and talk about a lot of the decisions that Starfinder has made in their game from Max's perspective as a talented voice designer
Cool.
who is specialized in games. So let's take a look at that. Um, and let's start playing.
I don't think these guys like us very much.
Your best friend, Raya Danviri, crouches next to you behind a large metal crate in one of the many dark alleys of the Spike, Absalom Station's gritty underbelly. From across the street, a pack of small-time gangsters blasts away at you, their aim as wild as their outfits. The thugs ambushed you after taking issue with the informal security services you've been providing in your neighborhood. Seem intent on removing you from their turf by any means. Raya looks to you.
Okay, so I'm an academic, not a mercenary. What's our play?
Are you someone who solves problems with force? Or do you look for creative solutions?
Force.
Okay. Do you charge out and clobber them? Sneak up and attack from hiding? Or rely on your superior gear and targeting system?
Charge up and clobber them.
Let's do this!
Raya leans over your weapon, and Tenny twitching in concentration as she works her magic.
Supercharge online!
Potential energy thrums the 3 razor-sharp spikes of your traditional Vesk Dashko.
Go get him! I'll cover you.
You sprint down the alley and slam your supercharged Dashko into the closest thug. A gray-skinned half-orc. The blow throws him against the wall, and the thrill of battle courses through your veins as his hot blood spatters your scales. You turn to the others, but they've already thought twice about taking on 7 feet of angry lizard, and are fleeing down the alley. You glare down at the semi-conscious thug as Raya strolls up beside you, twirling her laser pistol.
All right, you wannabe gangster. We don't want trouble, but we don't mind it either. Especially my friend Obozaya here. Steer clear, for your own good.
You step over his body and walk out of the alley. You are Obozaya, a towering reptilian soldier who specializes in heavy weapons and armor.
Do you mind if
Born
we
in the
pause after
Veskari,
the
you enlisted
character
in the
selection?
Empire's
Okay.
military and proved yourself on the battlefield, but chafed
We gotta
at
listen to this
bureaucracy.
sweet rock music.
Following in the footsteps of other legendary Vesk warriors, you soon left home to work as a mercenary in the Pact Worlds. Here, at last, you found what you'd been searching for. An endless series of battles and adventures, with no restrictions but your own sense of honor.
We'll play it through.
Would you like to play as Obozaya?
So, chat, if you have any questions about these sections, please write them out, and we will get to them. So, Max.
A few things happened there. So I think Ezra and Chris yesterday were talking a bit about the initial version of this. And what happened was you would open the skill, and it would take you through like a personality quiz that was mainly using poly voices. There wasn't a lot of sound design. And a lot of players like that. It's fun to take personality quizzes. But we also noticed that there was a certain amount of churn with people not understanding how to answer or not really understanding what that phase of the game was about. Also, it wasn't exciting. So in this version, you get dropped right into a pretty serious conflict with some thugs. And the intention there is to showcase as many elements of the game as we can, as quickly as possible. The inspiration for it is like a teaser scene in a television show. So typically, you can think about pretty much every TV show has it, and now that you think about it, you'll notice it in every show. But usually it's before the initial credits roll, and it's just something that sets you up to understand what's going to be happening in the episode and puts you in the right state of mind. So in The Office, there's always a scene where Jim is pulling a prank, and it's really funny, and sometimes it has almost nothing to do with the episode, but it has a really strong feeling of what the show is. It gets you into the mood of the show. So that's the intention there. It's drop you right into a conflict, and then the interaction is meant to help you select a character. And so in this situation, you chose to use force, and then you wanted to clobber them. And so that's Obozaya. And she is a large reptilian species. Yeah, she's a trained soldier, and she has this weapon called a Dashko, which has 3 spikes on it. And I don't know if you noticed, but also you have this buddy with you. So we're taking the opportunity to introduce you to Raya.
I'm gonna try and pull up a picture of Obadiah, but I actually can't spell
It's
it.
yeah, Obozaya.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there we go.
yeah, Obozaya is great.
Uh,
So yeah, she just she clop she does. Um, and then you have your buddy Raya, Raia, and she took advantage of in that initial scene to set up kind of what her specialty is. So she supercharges your Dashko. And that's one of her special moves. She's a technomancer, um, very emblematic of the world of Starfinder. Like she is a spellcaster who like weaves technology and magic together. So yeah, it gives you an idea that like she has this superpower that she can use. You can clobber things, your buddies. There are thugs in this world that are going to try and attack you. Um, and then ending with this character specific music and story. And you're right, like for Obadiah, like it's pretty over the top, but it's rad. Like it's this kind of this uh this like rock anthem for Obadiah. And then you get to decide. And so there isn't a ton of it, like hopefully it didn't feel like a tutorial, but you learned a lot about the world and what to expect. And it didn't feel um, like a character selection flow, but at the end of it, you have a character that matches the way that you want to play.
yeah, and I mean, so this is this is an adaptation for Alexa of a tabletop game, right? Where
Yes.
literally there are no limits. The limit is just what your dungeon master, limits you to. So
Right.
it seems like a really hard space to allow all possible creations of characters at the start of a voice game. So how do you handle the different, all the different permutations possible, right? Are there play styles for everyone in here with the different characters?
Yeah, that's the goal. So there are five characters, and they are the Starfinder iconics, and so they
Ah,
each have a certain specialty. So Obadiah is the soldier, but you could also play as Navasi, who is an an envoy. Her specialty is like negotiating with people. She's really good at bluffing. And so the path through the game, if you're playing as Navasi, is very different than if you're playing as Obadiah, and there are certain points at which that skill set um, comes into play. But to your point about like just the breadth of possibilities, um, we when you do a kind of a choose like a pick your path kind of
yeah.
adventure, you can focus on breadth or having a story that kind of diverges and then comes back together so that you can get something that has choices but can take a character further down the path of a story. And so instead of offering like, here's five choices you can choose from, which is very difficult to do in voice,
Oh yeah.
but might give a sense of lots of freedom, it's actually like ends up being more of a burden because I have to remember what all those are. I have to really think about like how do I weigh five different options, right? Like when you're thinking about how going out to dinner, right? If someone's like, here's five options, it's like, oh man, this is terrible. Um, so like we do that with our kids. It's like, hey, do you want this or this, and it gives them freedom, but they get to make a choice. um, and so we tried to do the same thing. We tried to make sure that if we have maybe sometimes three choices, but most of the time two choices, they both feel like really good choices, um, and that they are different. And so making them different gives you the sense that you have a range of choice, and then making them both compelling like makes it a reasonable decision.
I see. That's really interesting. So kind of like giving them choice while keeping them, on the rails of the experience that you want to create.
Yeah, like more is not more, right?
Yeah.
So like just making sure that the two or three options that you do give them are really compelling. Um,
So
Yeah, and we can keep playing a little bit too, and some of those things will come up a bit.
Okay, we have a couple of questions and comments in the chat here. So there's some questions about the background. That is a web API experience where they're using animations from a web app.
Yes, and yeah, lots of little stars flying at you.
A lot of people are liking the audio design, so when and we're going to see a lot more examples of that as we continue playing, and I'm sure you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, really, the main thing was like in the initial version, it took maybe 5 minutes before you got that.
Oh.
There was a little taste of it in the beginning where the Starfinder intro came in and explained the world, but then it switched into poly voice with no background. So the change here was really like the beginning is you're in the middle of a conflict and there's gunfire, and you know, when you slam your Dashko into them, they like fly against the wall. Yeah, just really hitting you with that, like a super big dose of that in the beginning, so you get a sense of what's going to happen in the rest.
Yeah,
of the
I personally like that. Like, you might lose me if it was 5 minutes long in the intro there, but this is.
Yeah.
Anna's asking a hard question here. Were things lost or new things gained from going from traditional game, from the tabletop game, into voice? So what do you think was maybe like lost or gotten here?
Yeah. It is obviously like more on rails than a traditional live role-playing experience, because you know the story needs to be accounted for up front, as opposed to having like a human be able to adapt to anything you would think that you would want to do along the way. So I think maybe the biggest difference that players notice is that instead of so in a tabletop role-playing game, typically you'd present the players with the situation and have them think of ways that they might overcome it. And so in this, we're presenting you with a few different ways that you could overcome that situation, and then you're making the choice about which one. And that's probably the biggest difference.
I see. All right, let's go see some more of that brilliant sound design. Yes.
Progress saved.
Dead Sons. Episode 0.
I also like the
Scoundrels in the Spike.
Those
Estimated
moments where
playtime,
you use
30
audio
minutes.
to cue them into something. Right.
Like the save.
Like the save.
Eager to put some distance between yourselves and the thugs you just bested, you make your way toward the crowded market corridors of Down Low. This neighborhood is the largest and safest in the Spike, which isn't saying much. Curious hipsters from richer districts rub shoulders with locals at dive bars, black markets, and restaurants featuring cuisine from dozens of alien worlds. Raya discreetly scans the crowd for trouble.
I hope those gangsters are smart enough to let things be.
The countless computers and technological bits strapped to her trademark trench coat mark her as a technomancer. A magical hacker who blends spells and technology.
I mean, I welcome the excitement. I just wish we could direct our efforts towards something greater.
Your comm unit lights up, attracting your attention.
Obozaya, you have a message from the Starfinder Society.
The Starfinder Society is a league of adventurers dedicated to interstellar exploration, making contact with strange new cultures and piecing together the galaxy's mysterious history. You and Raya signed up last week, in hopes that they'll be your ticket to bigger and better things. This is the call you've been waiting for.
Do you play the message?
Yes.
Greetings. This is Starfinder Chizkisk from the Society's headquarters. I have a bit of an unusual first mission. Someone's been tearing up corridors in your sector of the Spike, and reportedly taking potshots at station technicians sent to make repairs. Station security would normally handle this sort of thing, but they've got their manipulators full with some sort of gang scuffle. They've asked us to help out, and since it's your home turf, we're sending you and Raya. I'm transmitting the coordinates. The Society will pay you each 250 credits for clearing the area.
Raya grins at you. Like all Lashuntas, she has 2 forehead antennae that grant her limited telepathic powers, and they're currently vibrating with excitement.
Finally, a chance to prove ourselves to the Society. Can you imagine it? You and me exploring the universe as Starfinders? Oh, I am ready to roll. Do you have what you need?
Try asking me, what do I have?
What do I have?
Inventory report, Dashko, hunting rifle, ceremonial plate, and 2 healing serums. You can ask about your inventory, or hear more about a specific item at any time. For example, try asking me, what is ceremonial plate?
What is the hunting rifle?
A hunting rifle is
Should we
designed
pause
for
after
taking
the
down game
inventory?
animals rather
Yeah.
than for military use,
Okay.
but it still makes an effective weapon. It deals 1d8 damage with a range of 90 feet.
Sounds like we're good to go. Let's head to the coordinates.
You catch a ride.
Okay. Actually, I'm going to rewind very slightly there, so we can play that train sound again. Or
Yeah.
bus sound.
Yeah, the Bev.
Yeah, so I mean, I tried to trip the game up a bit there. You know, it told me to ask something. I asked something different just to,
Yeah.
you know, I wanted to know what my stats on the hunting rifle was.
Yeah, yeah. So you can ask about any item in the game, and it will tell you a little description about the item. It'll give you like an audio artifact, like giving you an audio description of the item. So like a hunting rifle is a kinetic long arm. So like you hear that, like the sound of it like being cocked, and then you get a description of like the stats for it.
So one of the things I noticed with the stats was it says it does 1d8 of damage, which is like very tabletop gamer centric jargon. So is the primary audience for the Starfinder skill the Starfinder tabletop players, or anyone really?
I think anyone. We, I think really like there's 2 main. Well, let's see. I mean, tabletop role-playing gamers, I think, will be familiar with a lot of the terms that are used in it. But if you're not, we describe those for you. And we do that by, instead of doing a long tutorial up front, we just give you little bits of information along the way to help you navigate like the issue at hand. For example, like there's combat in this game, but you haven't heard really very much about combat. And when you do have your first combat, we introduce each rule element as it goes. And we try and do it like as succinctly as possible, because a lot of people playing the game probably are familiar with tabletop role-playing games. So we don't want to over-explain things.
Yeah.
But yeah, like 1d8, you know, that we explain, we just tell you that up front. But if you're in combat, we tell you to roll 1 8-sided die or 1d8. We kind of like alternate between those depending.
Cool. Yeah, I do like the gradually teaching you how the mechanics of the Alexa skill that's happening here.
Yeah, and so we tried to provide narrative elements to have those things fit in and not feel like a tutorial. So one of those was when Raya asks you if you're ready and you check your inventory. hopefully educating you that you have an inventory, you can check it, here's how you would ask to do that. You can also ask about items within it, and then you had the intuition to ask about an item that wasn't prompted. So in that case, like that would be considered a success because you learned that feature.
So we have a question here from W. Giorgio. How did you get background music and polyvoice together?
So it's built using Skillflow Builder, and that is a feature that you can use in Skillflow Builder.
Yeah, so I just threw a link to Skillflow Builder down into chat there. It's a pretty cool tool. And we actually have a session with Ezra where we're going to deep dive into Skillflow Builder. So I encourage you to check that one out, W. Giorgio. Anna Matronics is asking, was all of the music sound effects custom made?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much all of them. Obviously, like Raya's voice, the narrator's voice, all of that's being mixed in with the VO beforehand. But we can also mix things in on the fly, but all the audio effects being used are custom.
Very cool. Anything else you want to point out in this section, or should we keep going down the hallway?
I think from just like a voice design point of view, like what's been accomplished here is that we've done a lot of exposition. So like you learned what the Starfinder Society is, you've gotten a mission, you've learned a little bit more about Raya, that she's a technomancer, that she's a Lashunta. So like you've learned a lot in a short amount of time, and really tried to keep it to just the things that were important for building the world for you and allowing you to progress then through the rest of the story, because we don't want you to feel like there's too much exposition. Like you just got your mission, let's go to the mission, and then along the way maybe you can learn a little bit more about Raya, maybe you can learn a little bit more about Absalom Station and the different neighborhoods.
Yeah, like ultimately this isn't a audiobook, this is a game that you want to play, right?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a mix between them.
Storytelling, interactive fiction.
Yeah, I think that was a pivot in my understanding, was that it's a story that you can play, and so a lot of the traditional video game best practices may or may not apply. In a video game, like a lot of times you'll optimize for repeated playthrough, whereas you may or may not do that in a story. Like maybe you just play through it once and then continue on to the rest.
Cool. Anna's also wondering, how do you keep track of things like inventory and other combo factors in the game?
That's just tracked in Skillflow Builder. So we can say like, so getting into like technical specifics. So I'm a designer, so I know the answer, but like in my world, it's a variable that gets set in Skillflow Builder. That's one of the reasons I like Skillflow Builder, is that like that's all I need to know. But that does then get saved to the state, which gets saved to a Dynamo table, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, let's save that question for Ezra for the specific details there. M. Tucker PHX asks, were you involved with storylets? And can you talk more about them? So what are storylets?
I'm not super well versed in that. That is something that I've heard bandied back and forth, but I'm not super familiar with it.
Sorry, M. Tucker. Shall we continue, Max?
Yeah.
You catch a ride on a maglev train leading down deeper into the spike. As you ride along in the cramped carriage, squashed between a bug-faced Sheeran and a four-armed Kasaltha, you look out the window at neighborhoods even shabbier than your own. You may be local, but you still know better than to go all the way down to the ghost levels. Fortunately, this job will only take you to the edge of Pipe Town. You get off at your stop, and the crowd quickly thins. By the time you reach the access corridor the coordinates specified, you're alone. Or almost alone. As you approach the hallway entrance, a human worker in coveralls stumbles out, holding a bloody gash on his head. He limps towards you.
Oh, gods protect me, my head. Ow.
What'd you say to the injured worker?
Why are you so beat up?
Trying to make a good impression or convince someone to do something requires an interaction skill check.
Time to test your aptitude for interaction. The interaction skill
Let's pause
represents your
after the
ability
worker
to navigate
interaction.
social
Okay.
situations and bluff, intimidate, or win over individuals. Roll one 20-sided die for interaction check and tell me what you get. Or ask me to roll for you.
9.
Plus 4 interaction bonus is 13.
What happened? I'll tell you what happened. A dang goblin clocked me over the head with a dang pipe. An automated alert had told me the area was temporarily off limits, but I've got a job to do, you know? Well, next thing I know, this little pointy-eared mongrel leaps out and attacks me. Ugh. Oh, and now I'm left with this splitting headache.
Ouch. He looks like he could use a healing serum.
Do you try to help the worker by giving him a healing serum?
Give him a healing serum.
The worker eyes you suspiciously, but takes the offered healing serum and drinks it. Immediately, the gash on his head knits shut. His eyes widen, and he smiles.
Hey, that's right decent of you. I thought I'd have a headache for weeks. You don't look like those slackers in station security, but if you're here to take out that trash, then you've got my thanks twice over. And listen, since you were kind enough to offer me your serum here, take my radiation buffer. The other techs and I use them. It won't protect you completely, but it'll give you a better chance of making it through if you run into a hot zone. Good luck in there.
He claps you on the shoulder and heads off down the corridor, whistling happily.
One healing serum removed from inventory. Radiation buffer added to inventory.
All right.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah. Can you talk me through like when you were talking to the worker, what was going through your head?
So I honestly wanted to interrogate him at first. That was my first, intuition. And I really enjoy the way that Starfinder handles anything you throw at it at that moment. Any utterance you say seems to be handled by, oh, well, if you want to try that, you're going to have to do an interaction check, which is, very true to a real tabletop experience. At least my tabletop experiences. So that was kind of cool, as a way to kind of handle, give people a choice without letting them jump the rails.
Yeah, and I don't know if you noticed, but there was a little phrase that told you about an interaction check, and explained that there are these things called checks. Here's how you do them. This is interaction. This is what it's for. And so that automatically plays the first time that you use that specific check. So that's just another example of educating the player along the way dynamically, with small bits of instruction. So if you use next time, whenever you use culture, it'll describe the culture skill.
Yes, I like that in that you're not overwhelming them with all the possible checks you could be doing, right? Nor are you explaining all of the stats that affect those checks, and that just kind of comes in when it's relevant.
Yeah, and so at that point, basically, yeah, your intuition is pretty correct. There's a wide range of what you can say right there. And there are some differences. You can be very mean, and it just automatically, he's like, all right, well, fine then. I hope they beat you up too. So
Oh,
yeah.
no. I have to replay this now.
Yeah. And there are some folks that like want to find all the different paths that you could possibly take. Um, but you were nice and you gave him a healing serum, and then in exchange he gave you something that maybe it's useful down the road.
I was
Yeah,
also nice that I didn't lie about my die roll.
yeah. So we do. Yeah, so a few things happened there, and hopefully they went pretty quickly and didn't feel like hard decisions. But you had your dice ready and you were able to roll. But you can also ask her to roll for you. Um,
That's what I had to do
yeah,
the first playthrough when I didn't have my dice ready.
yeah, yeah, and you can switch back and forth if you'd like to roll, if you'd like her to roll for you. And yeah, we don't we don't mind if you cheat. Um, there there might be situations where if you cheat a little bit too much, maybe we acknowledge that.
You just
And
acknowledge it and you allow them to?
yeah, I mean, I mean, it's true to the tabletop role-playing experience that if you want to cheat, like maybe your character is super lucky, you know?
Looks like Max Attacks is giving a little spoiler here. Episode 1 is an exciting journey following the worker as he tries to navigate the complexities of workman's comp and hazard insurance. So, spoiler alert, everyone. You heard it here first.
Yeah. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, so JB Nunn is wondering who did the voice work for this, and Jeff loves it.
At the end of the episode, we have full credits with all of the voice actors. And yeah, they're professional voice actors, and they're great.
Yeah, it really is amazing. The just all of the audio. One of the things I want to talk about here too is tell me a bit about how you set about how the Starfinder scene was set for the bus that bus ride. Like, there's a lot going on when you're in that bit with the audio.
As you're traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like from a sound design point of view, or from like a story point of view, or both?
Both.
Yeah, so yeah, the narration and the story itself can do some things, and then the sound design can either supplement that, it can add things to it. In that situation, I found that it's really good when they complement each other because it is basically like coding it in two different ways and presenting it to you. Um, in the same way that like when you are watching a movie, like the you see a person walking and you can hear them walking, and that's encoding the information and sending it to you in two different ways. Um,
Oh.
and like in a movie, like they may or may not be like recording those at once. Like maybe they are designing that sound of them walking and adding it into it very deliberately. Um, so it's the same situation. Like you hop on the maglev and it has a sound that accompanies it, and whenever you're traveling, that sound could play, and we might call it a maglev specifically, or we might not, and just give you a sense of movement and moving around the station. Um, Also, at that point, like you're traveling through Absalom Station, and at this point, like at multiple points in the story, the station has been described to you in different components. So, like in the very beginning, you are in an alleyway in the Spike. So it's introducing that like you are on the space station. It is massive. There are slums, and you are in there. And then you're in like Down Low, which is more of a marketplace. It has a totally different audio feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's introduced that like this is where you live, this is where you're from, and you're transitioning to a more desolate, potentially more dangerous area, and so that's a different feel as well. And so just the idea of like at one point, we're not overloading you with too much information about the world. It's just little pieces that are stringing together, hopefully to form something very cohesive, and then supplementing it with sound design.
Yeah, no, it does a great job of just kind of setting the atmosphere with the audio, and then the narrator like no longer needs to do that. right? It doesn't need to tell me that the bus is crowded. I can hear that it's crowded. And then it says the crowd dispersed, and it kind of draws my mind to the fact that that was the case in the first place.
Yeah, and you asked initially about like what the difference between like traditional design and voice design, and like one of the best assets is the theater of the mind. So like that just short description from the narrator and then just a little bit of sound design, and you've built this world in your mind of what that looks and feels like. Um, yeah, it's pretty powerful and like something that I maybe took for granted early on.
Yeah, it is very powerful. So we've got a couple of comments here. Trinity says he loves that you can roll the dice at home, but if you're playing in the car, you don't have to go chase that D20 in the back seat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you you can play your tabletop game without a table, and you don't even need other people around.
There's actually also you asked a question earlier about like who's the target for this, and there's if you're having Alexa roll the dice for you, she can also enable fast mode, and so basically like that just removes a lot of the details that are like bread and butter to tabletop role playing, but might not be uh, very familiar to someone who's just like a science fiction reader, who's still interested in this, but they're just not super interested in like my different bonuses that get applied. They just want to know the result. So there's that for people who aren't super interested in that. And again, like, you don't get confronted with that right away. It's important that you understand that like there's logic behind this. There is like when you attack, you roll for attack and then you roll for damage. It's important to understand that, but then you can remove that and abstract it and just have it happen and hear the story.
Yeah, and even still though, you don't end up losing that die roll sound, so they still know that it's happening. So actually, let's.
Yeah, and
Oh,
that's
yeah.
and yeah, and that's like the audio signposts. So like, when the game saves, you get that like there's a lot of those all over the place. And the die roll is an interesting one because like it doesn't sound like a die roll, but in your mind it is a die roll and we can use it that way.
Yeah, yeah, you're built to associate that like when it's already, when it happens, and Alexa takes the place of that die, which actually I think I
Yeah.
do in a bit here. Let's go back and play some more.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You earned the Friend of the People award for giving the worker a healing serum. Keep playing to discover more awards.
The corridor specified by the coordinates is an access tunnel branching off from the main passage, dimly lit by flickering emergency lighting. Conduits of all sizes, the sort that give this neighborhood the name Pipetown, run along the sides of the walls, carrying the various substances that keep the space station running. Some of the cables have been broken and stripped, and small amounts of gas vent from dented pipes. Raya curls her antennae in disgust.
No wonder maintenance wanted to get in here. What kind of idiot vandalizes their own space station?
The corridor is only wide enough for one person at a time.
I'm an academic, not a scout. Want to take the lead?
Do you take the lead?
You move forward into the tunnel. Raya follows close behind, laser pistol
I
raised.
said yes. I think I had myself
Time to
muted
test your
accidentally.
perception. The perception skill represents your ability to notice danger, pick out fine details, and search for hidden objects or creatures. Roll one 20-sided die for perception check.
2.
Plus one perception bonus is 3.
As you move forward down the corridor, you hear a small click from beneath your feet. You absorb the majority of the blast, taking 4 points of damage. Raya takes 2 points of damage from flying shrapnel.
Oh, that stings. No. Someone doesn't want unexpected visitors.
Should we talk about the
Progress
bomb?
saved.
Sure. Alright, just hit a save point.
Yeah, so you failed the perception check.
Yeah.
You didn't notice that there was a small bomb planted. If you do notice it, then you can try and disarm it or jump over it. And those use different skills. So, like, you just use the perception skill, but you could have also then afterwards used technology or athletics to overcome that obstacle. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, in that scenario, I actually thought about cheating and lying on my perception check because I was pretty sure I was not going to pass it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's tempting, right, if you're rolling. Yeah, and then I guess the other thing to call out there is that you hit another save point. And we added in something so that now there's percentages along the way. And in voice, I think it's important to have those type of milestones. Um, one difference between like voice design and traditional design is that voice design is much more linear, right? Like I consume it in a linear fashion as opposed to visual where I can present many things at once. If I presented lots of things at once through audio, you can do that a little bit with like a background track with some special effects, but you can only really hear one voice at a time. Um, so in a video game, typically you could just have something pop up that doesn't interrupt you, that tells you that it's a save point, or some progress bar that's persistent that tells you how far along you are. You can't do that in voice, so sometimes there's a like a desire not to have it because it seems like it gets in the way. But players get nervous if you don't let them know how far along you are. There's nothing to give you that context. You have to be explicit about it. And so this is using percentages, and yeah, players like that appreciate it.
Yeah, I definitely did appreciate that when going through it, too, because and at the beginning it kind of tells you how long the experience will be, and that you'll be able to save. So you kind of know going in that you don't have to devote, an hour to it, all in one go. So that's nice, because that's not always clear with voice games.
Yeah, and every voice game, I mean not everyone, but a lot of them say, hey, you can leave anytime, we'll save your progress. But people hear that and then forget it. So this reminds you over and over again that your progress is being saved. And players do really appreciate it. Also, just giving you a sense of how long you are through the game is useful. Like, if you're 90% done, you probably want to know that because you want to finish it instead of taking a break.
Yeah, it's interesting too, the point that you brought up with you can use soundscapes to communicate a lot of information, but players get overwhelmed when there are too many choices presented or too much information presented. So what kind of tenets will guide you in choosing to put something into a soundscape or omit it altogether, or have it in the main prompt and voice narration?
I mean, like when in doubt, having sound for it is good.
Okay.
Yeah, it almost always improves the experience. Yeah, like encoding something as a sound as well, like really reinforces that in ways that people might not like perceive immediately, but like their brain is like doing the work of making those connections behind the scene and helping them understand what's going on.
So let's go to some questions from chat. And I do have a little more recorded, but I don't think we will get to the battle in the remaining 10 minutes. So if you have questions, please post them now. Any questions for Max here? So Anna says, can you do multiplayer and take turns?
You cannot in this experience, but I think that's a really interesting idea for where to take it.
Yeah, especially the battle is very turn based. Just like a D&D battle is. You even roll to see your initiative where you are in the fight order.
Yeah, and you do have an ally, and um, even though it's scripted and an AI, it does help guide you through the game, and that's like very purposeful to like play that role. But yeah, I think it'd be really cool if like one of your other allies could be an actual person that you're playing with.
Urban Blaster wants to parkour the bomb. Uh,
You can.
oh, nice. That's
Uh,
in the interaction model.
Maybe not parkour. But yeah, but you can use athletics. Maybe that needs to be a synonym.
Okay, there we go. There you go. Just roll an athletics check, Urban Blaster. Um, yeah, Anna also wants to know, can you check your HP or does the game tell you you're getting close to dying?
You can check it, and it will tell you if you are getting close to dying.
Yeah, I want to say you teach the player that Starfinder teaches the player like later on post battle or in the battle how to do that.
Yeah, and what I've learned in voice games is like it's best to just present things when they're important to know rather than relying on the player to know when to ask. But then also, if they want to ask, support it. Um, so they're check all their stats and they're really interested in that stuff. But Starfinder takes the approach that you can always ask those things, and then it'll drop you right back in the game. Or when it's important to know, you'll know that your health is getting low.
So we have a interesting question here from Cocktails Guy. How'd you test the game, and how do you do beta testing for it?
Um, well, I can talk like more generically just about how I test voice games.
Yeah, please.
Um, Yeah, so the first thing is before you even build it, build a paper prototype, and then get some friends together and have them play, and you play Alexa, and just you have your script in front of you, and you're flipping to whatever scene would describe what's happening to their situation. Um, I think it's best to do that before actually coding anything up because a lot of times you can get pretty far down the path of building something and realizing that your overall approach to it is not ideal. Um, so starting with that, just doing really informal play testing with paper prototypes. Also, like if it's fun with a paper prototype, it's going to be awesome with you know voice actors and sound effects. And yeah, so just making sure that the fundamentals are really good with paper prototyping. And then the next would be using something like Skill Flow Builder, which is this is built on, but is also really good for generating quick prototypes. So writing out the flow, and then Skill Flow Builder has a like an editor application that you can use. You can just hit play, and it'll start playing the whatever you've written, and then you can make choices there. Um, so that's just another level to step the fidelity up to make it a little bit more higher functional fidelity. And then beyond that, just continuing to raise the fidelity, doing more in-person play tests. And then also I tend to do betas where whatever your pool of people that you can reach out to get them to play, doing some type of screener to make sure that they are relevant to the experience you're testing. Fortunately, like I have a lot of access to people who are into tabletop role-playing games and science fiction. They also tend to self-select. Like if this thing is interesting and you want to play it for no compensation, then you're probably like a good target audience for us to be testing with you. And then I tend to get their overall satisfaction of the game, other like open-ended feedback, yeah, and just incorporate it. My process, like for voice design and for overall design, is just to have as many loops of like creating something that is reviewable, a paper prototype, a functional prototype, actual skill, whatever, putting it in front of people, getting feedback, and then incorporating that feedback and doing that as many times as you can before you have to ship.
So really, game design fundamentals and UX fundamentals apply to voice games as well.
Yeah, and my background before this was like working on retail websites, running usability tests, and so they're like, you're testing to see if something is functional and usable, and so the only difference with a game play test is um, like in a usability test, you would tell somebody what their mission is. You'd say like, you are looking to buy a new sleeping bag, and then you'd give them a website to shop for one, and they would explore it and try and do it, and you'd find all the ways that they fail or were able to do it. Whereas with a game, you say, here's this thing, like, have fun, play it, um, and you're still looking for usability issues. You're still looking for ways to improve it, make it more fun.
Cool. That's yeah, that's really interesting. And do you have any now that we're kind of getting towards the end, what advice do you have to aspiring game developers or aspiring voice designers who are building these kinds of like narrative experiences, or really any kind of voice games? What would be your biggest advice points?
Um, just some quick things that I've learned. So one is if you're interested in narrative games, study uh, writing screenplays. Um, like we are programmed to understand a three-act structure, because almost all of the media that we consume is presented that way, and it's really tried and true.
Hmm.
Um, and just understanding the different elements of that. There are tons, and there's so much content out there about like how to write a really good screenplay, and approaching a story-based game like a screenplay. Um, I guess the next thing would just be to like play test early and often. Like before you code anything, try and play test it. If you can represent your game as a board game, or write things out on cards, represent it in some other way, just to see if it's fun before you realize if it's actually like worth building. Um, that's really that's really important. Being willing to like throw away an idea if it's just not that fun.
Especially like once you're getting to the point that you have voice actors or you're pre-compiling audio or something like that, right? Your level of commitment has risen. You're writing code, your level of commitment has risen, right? There's more to throw out if it's no good. um,
Yeah, and hopefully your process has like built a lot of confidence along the way. Um, yeah,
that's a
because
good
it's
point
scary.
too.
Like if not, like that just makes me so nervous. If you have like, you know, like the entire way you should be like making sure that it's worth the investment, based off whatever your targets are. And typically with a game, that would be like how enjoyable it is.
Cool, that's great advice. Well, thank you, Max, for joining in on this call here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe.
This has been a lot of fun. Loved getting your perspective on Starfinder. And yeah,
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and if anybody's interested, just go play it. It's fun. There's a free experience out there, and it's pretty enjoyable.
yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll drop a link to Starfinder into chat in a moment here. And I hope to see you on the next Alexa Games Week stream.
All right, yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, bye.
All right, bye.